Hi, guys. Let's go ahead and take the quiz together. Now, hopefully, you have already completed the quiz, right? And you're just coming to this video to get help with the problems that you got wrong or to make sure that you understand exactly what I want on each answer line. So, I'm going to go into the quiz and I'm going to take it right now and show you my work and everything. And I'll talk about there were some pre questions, right, that were like, it wasn't just like, what's your simplified answer? There was like a question and then, okay, give me the final answer. So we'll talk a lot about those questions, make sure that you understand what I'm looking for so that we don't have any misconceptions on tomorrow's test. Let's start with question one. Okay. So before you even look at what these bottom questions are, we should just like try the problem. So I'm going to do the problem on my whiteboard, and then when I'm all done, I'll show you my work. Okay, so here is my work. And so I kind of separated the problem into like the coefficients and then the variables. And then my final answer is right here. So I'm going to go ahead and type in my final answer first. When I'm typing in my fraction answer, I'd like to hit the fraction bar first, creating the fraction, and then I can type in everything that I need to. Now, there was a pre-question on this one, and the pre-question is asking about the process of solving. So you can go ahead and solve the whole thing first and then go back and answer the pre-question. So the pre-question says, you simplify the x's by, so here are my x's in blue. And so what I did was I did subtraction. I did 10 minus 9, and I got a 1. So we simplify our x's by subtracting. That's one of our rules for exponents. We, on a division problem, subtract our exponents. All right, let's try the next problem. So this one again has our two answer boxes. So I'm going to do my work on my whiteboard, and when I'm ready, I'll show you what I got. All right, now I actually didn't finish this problem because of how the questions are worded. So all I've done at this point in time was I can't factor my numerator, but it is a subtracting problem, so I threw some parentheses around it. And then I did factor my denominator, and I did X box for that. Now, the first question wants the fully factored form. So that wants like after you're all done factoring and right before you start crossing things off, what does your paper say? So I'm going to put my fraction bar, and on top I have an x minus 3. And then on the bottom I have an x minus 3 and another x minus 3. So that's my fully factored form. You want to type that in before you start crossing things off. So now I'm going to take my red marker and I'm going to cross off the x minus 3 and the x minus 3. I'd like to point out that the only parentheses we have left is below a fraction bar. It does need to stay below the fraction bar. And then if everything from the top crosses out, then you just put a 1 on the top. And that's going to be my final answer. Notice that my final answer and my fully factored form are different. Okay. All right, let's try the next one. This one has the same two answer bars. So when you're doing this problem, factor it completely. And then before you cross anything out, type in your first answer. After you type in your first answer, then you can start crossing things off. Okay, so at this point in time, all I've done is factored. So I've not crossed anything off yet, but I'm going to go ahead and type in my first answer. So when it wants the factored form, it wants what did you get after you did all of your factoring and before you started crossing things off. You're already missing stuff, you're going to lose points. Now I can start crossing things off, and on this problem, I can only cross off my x minus 2's. And so then I'm left with x minus 1 on top and 8 on the bottom. And I like to keep my parentheses around my adding and subtracting problems so that I'm not tempted to cross things off that I'm not allowed to cancel. I'm going to keep my parentheses around the x minus 1. Okay. Now this one has a different question. So on this one, it wants to know which of the following are factors. Factors. Now this is going to be of the fully factored form, not of the final answer. So we are still going to stop after we're done factoring, and we're going to find every piece that's in this list, and then we'll write down the letter. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of my factoring, and then we can check back in and see what our first answer is. Okay, so I did all of my factoring, and I ended up doing factoring 3 times. So I did the difference of squares for the top. On the bottom, I had a GCF, and then after I took out the GCF, I still had an x squared here, so I can still try to factor again, and so then I did x box. And so this is my fully factored form. Now, from this fully factored form, I want you to pick the list of everything that's there. So there is an x plus 6 right now. I see there's one here and one there. There is not an x that's all by itself. There's not an x plus 7. There's an x minus 7, but not an x plus 7. There is a 3. It's right out here. So we're going to use the letter D. And then there is an x minus 6 right here. So then we'll use the letter E. All right. I think when I had this first posted, I think I accidentally had not factors written right here. So if you took the quiz on time, this one might have been a little bit confusing. So maybe you picked B and C because it said not factors, and I totally get it. I understand that that's why you picked those. So I will make sure that I check over the test and make sure that there are no typos before I post it. Now that I've answered the first part, I'm going to go ahead and write my final answer. And to do that, I'm going to need to cross some things off, the x plus 6's. Now, for your final answer, it is mandatory that you keep it in its factored form, okay? So what will happen if you don't keep it in your factored form, that kind of shows me that you're cheating. So make sure you're keeping it in your factored form. Do not distribute that 3. That is not accurate. You got to keep it factored to show me, hey, look, I did factor it. I promise. I swear to you. If you don't have it in its factored form, then it looks like you did not actually even factor it and that you were cheating. So make sure your final answer is in the factored form. Make sure you're doing all of your work on a piece of paper and that you're submitting a picture of your work as soon as your test is done. If you don't have work for this test, it is cheating. If you cannot show me that you actually did the problems, then I will assume that you are cheating. So make sure that you have everything written out and that you're submitting a picture. Okay. We're going back to write the fully factored form and then final answer. So let me factor this out for you, and then we will get to both of those answer lines filled in. All right, guys. This one also had 3 kinds of factoring. So for the numerator, I did X box, 2 numbers that multiply to make 3 and add to make 4. In the denominator, I started by taking out a GCF of the letter X. And then after I took that out, I still had an X squared, which means I might be able to factor this again. And I could. It was a difference of squares. So this is my fully factored form. If you are missing pieces of your fully factored form, I don't know. I don't know what you're doing, guys. So make sure that you are factoring it completely on your own and that you have not lost any pieces as you're going along. If you're losing pieces, that kind of shows me that you never had them to begin with. All right, in this problem, I can cross off my x plus 1s, and I cannot cross off anything else. So this x that's not in a parentheses, it can't cross off with an x that is in a parentheses. And just like on our previous problem, it is mandatory that you keep this in factored form, which means that your x is on the outside. If you don't keep it in factored form, it looks like you never factored to begin with. So make sure that it is completely still factored in the final answer. Oops. All right. Oh, we got another one. Okay, so I'm going to factor this. Now, on this one, you want to make sure that you factor it until you can cancel something out. So if you factor and you can't cancel something out and you have to factor again, that is still part of the factoring. And I'm saying this because in this problem, we're going to get one of those subtraction questions where the numbers and the letters are the same, but the order is not. So we have talked about this a couple times in class. We've practiced it a couple times where you actually take out a negative sign or a -1 if you want to. And that way you can switch the order of the numbers in the parentheses. Now you only need to do this if it's a subtraction problem that is in the wrong order. So I'm going to show you right now. I have 3 minus a and a minus 3. That is bad. I can't cancel those. So I'm going to do one more step of factoring. I'm going to take out a GCF of -1. And then basically it's just going to make the outside 11 a -11. And then it allows me to switch the order on the inside. Okay, so by making it a -11 instead, now I have a +3 and or positive a and a -3. So I want you to write this one as your fully factored form, the one where write the form like right before you start canceling. So I know that this is technically factored, but you're going to factor out something else. So make sure to wait until you're all done factoring and then say, okay, now this is my fully factored form. And then in this problem, I've made it so that I can cancel out my a minus 3's. And 11 and 6 do not simplify. So then I would just keep that -11 over 6. And it doesn't matter if you made the 11 negative or if you made the 6 negative. Just one of them needs to be negative so that you can cancel those out. Okay. So now we're getting into different problems. So now we're getting into our multiplication and division problems. And so I'm going to do my work on the whiteboard and then we'll check our answer. Okay, so in this problem, what I did was I canceled out my 18 and my 2. 18 divided by 2 is 9. And then I also was able to reduce the 9 and the 21 because those are both divisible by 3. So 9 divided by 3 is 3, and then 21 divided by 3 is 7. For my variables, my y's just completely canceled out since they were both just the letter y. And then for my x's, I did 5 minus 2 and got x to the third. Now remember, this is a multiplication problem, so you need to multiply together everything from the top and multiply together everything from the bottom. So for my final answer on this one, I got a 15 on the top, then a 7x to the third on the bottom. Now this one, the pre-question was, how do you simplify the coefficients? So the coefficients are the big numbers. And when I was doing my math for the coefficients, I was dividing, right? I did 18 divided by 2. So we're going to pick dividing for this one. All right. So let's move on to our next multiplication problem. Okay, so this one has adding and subtracting. So I'm going to go ahead and do my factoring, and then we'll talk about the answer. Okay, now in this one, we did have adding and subtracting, and I couldn't factor the first fraction at all. Nothing, there was no GCFs, not a difference of squares, nothing like that. But I did still throw some parentheses around it because it was an adding and subtracting problem. So anytime you have adding and subtracting, definitely throw some parentheses around it. The only place where I ended up factoring was on the bottom of the second fraction because I needed to take out a -1 so that I could cancel these out. Now this question wants to know how many times did I factor? So I only factored once. I factored a -1 out of here. If I cross off these two things, now I can write my final answer. When you're writing a final answer, even though it started as two fractions, you want to write it as just one fraction. So it's 5 over -1 times x plus 1. And again, make sure to keep it in factored form. Do not multiply it back out. If you multiply it out, it looks like you never even factored to begin with. So make sure that you're keeping it in factored form. All right. I think this is our last multiplication problem. On this problem, it's asking you what are the different ways that you had to factor. So again, I'm going to go ahead and factor, and then we can talk about what are all the different methods that we used, and then we'll find our final answer. Notice that on all of these problems, I start by just factoring, and then once I'm done factoring, then I can start thinking about, okay, what's the answers? What's the first answer, and then what's my final answer? All right, so here's my fully factored form, and I'm not going to type this all in because this question doesn't want that. It just wants to know, what did we do to factor? So on the top of my first fraction, I did GCFs. That's the letter A. On the bottom of my first fraction, I did difference of squares. That's the letter D. On the top of my second fraction, I did X box. That's the letter B. And then on the bottom of the second fraction, I did difference of squares again, but I already listed that. So the three different types of factoring I did were GCF, X box, and difference of squares. And so now I can get ready to write my final answer. I'm going to cross off a y minus 3 from the top and the bottom. Just one, though, one of each. So this other y minus 3, that's still going to be there. I can cross off my y minus 4s. And I think that's all I can cross off. Now, again, your final answer needs to stay in fully factored form. So you should not be doing any more math, no more calculations. You should just be smushing everything together into one fraction. I like to type my fraction bar first. Okay, so now y, and then y minus 3. Okay, and then y plus 4 and y plus 3. All right, so if you keep it in factored form, that shows me that yes, you did actually factor. You canceled out as many things as you possibly could, and there's definitely nothing else that cancels out. All right, we're moving on to our division problems. I think we had a total of 3 division problems. Division very similar to multiplication. We just need one pre-step, which is flipping the second fraction upside down, and then it changes to a multiplication problem. Now you have to make sure that you don't do any cross-canceling or any factoring or anything like that until you have actually flipped the second fraction. So we want to be a little bit careful with that. Okay, so I think I got an A on top and a 9 on the bottom. So now notice, though, I didn't cancel out the 3 and the 15. I waited until it got flipped, and then the 3 and the 15 actually don't end up canceling out. The 5 and the 15 end up canceling out. All right. These two 3s on the bottom, those are going to multiply together to make a 9. And then I had a to the first left over, so just the letter A. And this one just has that one answer line, so it's A over 9. All right, I think we have 2 more problems, 2 more division problems. So I'm going to go ahead and write this one down. Now this one, I think some of us got confused. The denominator of the second fraction, I do want the original denominator, not the new one after you flip it upside down. So I want to know what is the factored version of the 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. So I think some of us got a little bit confused and we did the new denominator instead of the original denominator. So that's why I'm telling you right now, I want the original denominator, not the new one. Okay, so again, and I understand maybe I didn't make this clear in the directions, so that's why I'm telling you right now. The factor denominator of the second fraction, I want the original denominator, the 2x squared plus 5x minus 3. Now that one I factored right here in purple. Because there was a 2 in front of the x squared, we had to use the x and the box. So make sure that you're using both. And then there will be one question like this on your test where you will have to use, again, the x and the box. So just be on the lookout for the problem with Xbox and like truly Xbox, X and box. All right, so let me cancel some stuff out. The x plus 4s cancel, the x plus 3s cancel, and I think that's it. Now in the denominator, we do want to put the monomial, this 3x, that's going to go up here in the front. We do want to put the monomials first and any of our leftover parentheses afterwards. And we are keeping it in factored form so that you are proving to me that yes, you did actually factor. Okay, guys, I think we're on our last problem. This one, again, wants to know the methods we used for factoring. So I am going to factor this one completely, and then we'll check and see which methods we used, and then we can write our final answer. Okay, so I'm all done factoring. And so I did not do any factoring on top of the first fraction because it was not factorable, so I'm not going to look there. But if I look at the bottom of the first fraction, I did take a GCF out. So that's the letter A. And then I did end up factoring the x squared minus 9. That's a difference of squares. So that's the letter D. And those were the only two types of factoring that I did. The only thing I can cancel on this problem is the x plus 3's. Since everything is gone from the numerator, I am going to put a 1 up there. I do still need it to be a fraction. And then in the denominator, again, leave it all factored. If you don't leave it in factored form, it looks like you literally never factored it at all. And then that is, well, first of all, it's a sign of cheating, but also, it means you didn't do the problem right, because these problems require factoring, so much factoring. All right, we're going to type in this last answer, and then we're going to see how we did. All right. So when you're done taking the quiz, you want to make sure that every question says the word done next to it. That means that you definitely submitted all of the answers, and that means you're going to get full credit for this homework. If any of them don't say done, then you're not going to get full credit for doing your homework. And then when you're feeling confident that you finished the whole thing, then you can click show solutions, and then it'll grade the quiz for you. Now, once you click show solutions, you cannot go back and do a problem. So if you're not 100% done and you click show solutions, then you won't be able to be 100% done and you won't get full credit. Oh, we got number 9 wrong. Let's check and see. I'm not sure what I did wrong on that one. Okay, so this one is one of the reasons why I have to grade your tests by hand. So I had written my letters in a different order. A, B, D is what the answer key says, and I wrote A, D, B. So when I'm grading your tests by hand, that's something that I would be on the lookout for, and I would still give you full credit. So even though Delta Math is giving me 0 points on this one, when I hand grade your tests, I would still give you full credit, but let's just make sure everything else is the same. So on top, I have a y and a y minus 3, y minus 3, that's good. And on the bottom, my y plus 3 and my y plus 4, those are also switched around. But again, when I'm hand grading your test, then I will give you full credit. That's why the tests take a little bit longer for me to enter in, because I do go through hand grade and I make sure that everything is actually like the way it's supposed to be. Okay, so I hope this was really helpful. Our test is tomorrow. Make sure you're showing all of your work on a piece of paper and that you are immediately uploading that picture once you have turned in your test. And I'll see you then.